The wind before the storm. The wind came down from the mountains like a whisper with teeth. It scraped the side of the cabin, pulling smoke from the chimney, rattling the frostbitten shutters like bones in a box. Snow drifted sideways in. The dusk, too heavy for the sky to hold, too tired to fall clean. A man moved slow within the weathered cabin, not because he was old, but because he'd seen too much. His name was Luther Kane, though he hadn't said it out loud in 3 winters. He moved like a man unfinished, one shoulder lower than the other, one hand stiff as wood, crushed years ago by musket fire. A faint limp dragged behind every step like a ghost. He laid one log on the fire. Not 2, never waste more than you need. Behind him, the cabin was bare but not empty. A Bible on the shelf, untouched, a cracked chair. One pair of boots too small? Tucked under the bed, the kind worn by a woman once or a child, before the earth swallowed them both. Outside. The wind rose louder, snarling through pine and ravine. He stopped to listen. The wind in these parts had a voice. Sometimes it said things. Sometimes it screamed. He went back to slicing dried meat. The knife moved steady. Thin strips. He hadn't spoken to anyone in months. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps, wooden, fragile, not the kind that threatened, the kind that asked. He froze mid-cut. No one knocked on Luther Kane's door, not out here. Not since the last man who did now lay somewhere up the ridge, bones picked clean by snowfall and time. He didn't answer. Another knocked. He rose, stiff, slow, picking up the rifle from beside the fireplace. A Winchester, scarred, reliable. He opened the door halfway, barrel low but ready, and there. In the dying light stood 2 girls, twins. No coats, cheeks red and raw, eyes darker than night. One held the other upright, though she trembled herself. They didn't cry. They didn't beg. They just stood there like stones. That had been waiting for centuries for someone to notice them. The smaller one lifted a piece of torn paper in a shaking hand. Luther didn't take it? Just stared. The older girl spoke, quiet but clear. She said you'd help. No name. No, please, just she. The wind yanked the words from her mouth and scattered them across the porch. Luther looked past them, down the mountain trail, nothing but white, no carriage tracks. No sign of others. Where's your mother? He asked, voice dry from disuse. The girl didn't answer. The younger one leaned into the other. Her lips were blue. He lowered the rifle and stepped aside. Inside. The cabin shifted like it was waking up from a long sleep. The fire hissed as snow melted from their shoes onto the stone hearth. He ladled broth into tin cups. They drank with both hands, as if the heat alone could save them. He didn't ask where they came from. He didn't ask their names. He just gave them blankets and watched from the corner of the room. The older one pulled off her sister's boots, red, blistered toes. She examined each one carefully before wrapping them in cloth from her own coat. Luther looked away. He had once seen battlefield surgeons do the same, just before the saw came out. He noticed their silence wasn't fear. It was ritual. Something they had learned long ago, to speak only when it mattered. To survive by shrinking. The note they'd carried still lay unread on the table. He didn't want to touch it. Not yet. It felt like it had weight. Like if he opened it, something in him might tear loose. That night, as snow buried the fences outside and wind howled through the cracks in the roof, Luther lay on his cot with eyes wide open. The girls slept on the floor, curled like foxes in the straw mat near the fire. At some point near midnight, the younger one stirred. She whispered something, not to him, not even to her sister, just to the air. Mama said he was the last good man. Luther closed his eyes and didn't sleep. Morning rose slow and silver. Luther stepped outside and saw the world. Had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that comes only after deep snow or deep grief. He shoveled a path toward the well. The pump fought him. Everything fought him lately. Asterisk, when he came back in, the girls were still asleep. A crow watched from the window, black eyes blinking. He finally picked up the note. The handwriting was familiar, but faded. He read it once. Then again, slower. Asterisk, if I don't make it, take them. You owe me that much. Just an initial, He sat down hard in the chair, the one that creaked like old knees. Firelight flickered. The letter trembled in his hands, not from cold. He remembered, Mercy, asterisk, a nurse. A black woman who once pulled a bullet from his shoulder. In the stink of a battlefield tent. She had hands like iron and eyes that forgave too much. She sang hymns under her breath. Even when men screamed all around her, she'd saved him. He hadn't saved her. Asterisk, a noise behind him. Soft footfalls. He turned. Asterisk, the older girl stood in the doorway, watching him. Her expression unreadable. Asterisk, he tried to speak. But something lodged in his throat like ash. Asterisk, she crossed the room. Picked up the letter. Folded it carefully. Slid it into her dress pocket. Then she looked up at him. We can help chop wood, he blinked. And for a long moment, he said nothing, then nodded, just once. By afternoon the storm came back harder. Snow slapped the window sideways. The girls helped bring in firewood, dragging each log with small gloved hands. Cheeks flushed, lips cracked. He didn't stop them. That night he gave them half his supper. Sat across the room while they ate. The younger one smiled at the warmth. The older kept one eye on him, not in fear, in measurement. He felt it. He wasn't sure he passed. Asterisk later. Long after they had curled into sleep again, Luther stepped outside into the wind. Asterisk, he looked at the grave beneath the tree line. No marker, just a stone. His voice cracked the silence. Mercy. Asterisk, then he whispered something else. Something no one had heard from his lips in years. Asterisk, God. If you're still there, don't let me fail again. A single snowflake landed on the letter in his hand and melted. Asterisk. The wind calmed, but something else had begun to move through the trees. Not a storm, not an animal. A silence, deeper than snow, sharper than hunger. It settled on the ridge above the cabin, unseen. But it watched. Asterisk inside Luther split logs. With steady hands, the girls watched through the window. Unia, the smaller one, had drawn a picture with charcoal on the inside of the barn wall. 2 stick figures standing near a tree, one taller, one crooked at the shoulder. He didn't ask who it was meant to be. He didn't need to. Asterisk, that night, he taught them how to sharpen a blade. He said little, just held the stone, motioned with a nod, let the rhythm teach. The older girl, Len, mirrored him exactly. The younger watched, eyes wide, quiet, soaking it in like breath. Asterisk, they had learned to survive by studying men's hands, not their words. Asterisk later. As dusk pressed its weight against the windows, Luther stepped outside to check the snares. Blood, not a rabbit. Not coyote. The ground told a different story, something larger, tracks near the chicken coop. Claw marks on the gate, cougar, it had circled twice, got one hen. Left the rest. He glanced toward the cabin. The girls, asterisk, he loaded a round into. The Winchester, listened. The pines made a low moaning sound, not from the wind, from memory. Asterisk the next day. He hung a lantern from the porch. Taught Len how to set a tripwire. He gave her a look when she caught on too quickly. Asterisk, done this before? He muttered. Asterisk, she shrugged. Mama showed us a lot. He almost smiled. That evening Unia brought out a small tin, inside 4 dried cranberries and a single acorn carved into the shape of a bird. Asterisk for you, she said. Luther stared at it. Why? Mama said you forgot how to be soft, she said, then walked away. Asterisk, he sat still for a long time, holding the carved acorn like it might shatter. Or bloom, he dreamed again that night, but not of war. He was in a field hospital. The canvas tent flapped open, the smell of burned cloth. Screams, asterisk Mercy's face, bent over him. Her hands, red to the wrist, her voice calm, she hummed a lullaby. The same one he heard faintly 2 nights ago when Unia whispered in her sleep. Asterisk, he woke with a start. Sweat slicked his spine. Asterisk, the fire was low. But something was wrong. Smoke, too much, asterisk he. Rose. Looked out the window, the barn. Smoke poured from the roof. Not flames? Not yet. But heat and panic moved in his chest like fire. Asterisk he ran barefoot into the snow, rifle forgotten. Through the doors wide. Inside, a figure, Unia. Asterisk holding a blanket over the lamp she'd knocked from the rafter while exploring. Asterisk no, he shouted, but before she could react the oil spilled, a gout of flame. The hay caught. Asterisk he grabbed her, wrapped her in his coat, and barreled outside. Smoke bit at his eyes, pulled at his lungs. The flames roared behind him, chasing them out. Like some old curse waking up for vengeance. Asterisk he collapsed in the snow, coughing. She sobbed into his chest. Her fingers clenched his coat, not from fear, but guilt. I didn't mean... I know, he said, voice rasping. I know, asterisk, the flames rose. The barn roof gave way with a crack like thunder. Asterisk Len came running. She dropped beside them. Her knees hit snow. Asterisk Unia cried harder. I ruined everything. Asterisk no, Len whispered. You're okay. You're okay. Asterisk Luther watched them hold each other like roots entwining in cold earth. Then he looked. Back at the fire, the barn, gone. So were the old saddles. The harness. A rifle. Food stores and the rafters. The saddlebag. Asterisk he closed his eyes. It was gone too. Asterisk they slept that night in the main cabin. All three on the floor. Asterisk at some point Len rose. She walked quietly to a small cupboard he hadn't opened in years. She paused, then slid it open. Luther didn't move. She pulled out a bundle wrapped in faded cloth, unrolled it. Inside, a silver locket. Asterisk he hadn't seen it since the war. Mercy had sent it to him once in a letter. Said it was all she had from her mother. Said, keep it safe. If you can't come back, bury it with me. He hadn't buried it, he'd hidden it. Len opened the locket. Inside, a miniature portrait. Mercy, younger, smiling. A lock of her hair. Len stared at it. Luther sat up. The fire cast red shadows across his face. She was your mother, he said. Len didn't answer. Just nodded once. Asterisk Unia stirred behind her, murmuring. Len closed the locket and held it to her chest. Asterisk. She told us about you, she said finally. Said you were the only man who never looked away when she bled. Luther blinked hard. She never stopped waiting, Len added. She told us if we ever needed to find you. Asterisk he couldn't speak. His throat was ash. Asterisk, she said. Len hesitated. You'd already carried too much death. But maybe you'd remember how to carry. Something small. Something alive. Unia sat up now, too, eyes half closed. She said you'd forgotten how to love, she whispered, but you'd remember when it was your turn to protect. Silence. Only the fire answered. Popping softly, like bones. Asterisk outside, snow fell. Again, quietly. Days passed. Asterisk the girls helped rebuild what they could. Unia sang while stacking firewood. Len skinned a rabbit clean. Luther watched them like a man who'd been deaf all his life, hearing something for the first time. Asterisk. Then the tracks came, one morning by the tree line, fresh, boot prints, heavy. Not alone. Asterisk 2 men. Maybe 3, one with a limp. He recognized the gait. Asterisk he hadn't seen the man in years. A name came back like bile. Harlan Wex. Asterisk a drunk, a brawler. A man who had once cornered Mercy in a rail town after the war. Claimed her. Bruised her. Never let go. Asterisk if he was alive and here. Then this wasn't random. Luther stared into the trees. This wasn't over. Not yet. Asterisk that night. He sat with the girls at the table. Asterisk he took out the locket. Set it between them. Asterisk you're not leaving, he said. But you need to know. His voice caught. I've failed before. Asterisk Unia reached out. Touched his hand. Asterisk. Then don't fail now. He looked at her. Len said nothing. But her eyes. They were Mercy's. Asterisk and, He knew it was coming. The smoke. The blood. But this time, he wasn't going to run. Asterisk. The wind had stilled, but the birds were gone. Luther stood at the edge of the tree line before dawn. one hand resting on the stock of the Winchester, the other hanging useless at his side. A layer of hoarfrost covered the pines, the branches, silvered like a graveyard of glass. He saw the boot prints again, now closer. Then he heard it, a cough. A grunt, metal against bone. They were less than a mile off. He turned toward the cabin. Smoke rose gently from the chimney. Inside, the girls still slept, curled beside each other like two halves of a broken heart mended by threadbare warmth. Luther didn't want them to wake to screams. He didn't want them to see more fire. But he knew the world didn't care what children should or shouldn't see, so he began to dig. Not a grave, a trench. A makeshift wall behind the chicken coop. Piled. Stones, wet earth, old timber. It wouldn't stop bullets. But it would buy time. By midday, the snow began to melt. The silence before the kill, then hoofbeats. 3 men rode in slow, not hurried. Not cautious, confident. The one in front had a bent leg and a mouth twisted like he was always mid-laugh. Harlan. Wex. He wore no badge. Just scars, bad teeth, and a rusting revolver holstered low like a drunk trying to remember his youth. Luther stood in the open, waiting. You're a hard man to find, Wex said. Wasn't hiding. Wex laughed, spitting brown juice into the snow. The other 2 stayed mounted, one chewing, the other watching the cabin windows. I heard you had company, Wex said. Voice almost polite. Luther didn't answer. Wex leaned forward, reins loose in one hand. Where's Mercy? She's gone. A pause. Wex frowned. She was mine, he said softly. She left with my blood in her. Those girls, they're not yours. Luther said. A silence dropped like stone. Then came the draw. Quick, but Luther had already moved. 1 shot, clean through the saddle horn. Wex's horse reared. Wex hit the ground hard. The other 2 scrambled. Gunfire erupted. Luther ducked behind the coop wall as splinters exploded around him. He returned fire. 1 shot clipped the rider's shoulder. The man screamed, toppled sideways. But Luther was outnumbered, and no cover lasts forever. Then a 2nd shot rang out. From the cabin, she stood in the doorway, rifle in hand, jaw tight, eyes like slate. She didn't blink. The remaining man turned toward her. But before he could fire, Unia was there. Small, fierce. She flung hot ash from the hearth into his face. He screamed. Blinded, and Luther surged forward, tackled him into the snow. Steel. Cracked bone. A knife flashed. Then silence, only the ragged sound of breathing. The scent of gunpowder and blood. Luther looked down at the man's body. He didn't feel relief, just weight. He turned. Wex had crawled into the snow. Gun in hand, blood in his teeth. He raised it, and Len pulled the trigger. The gun fell. From his hand he gasped once, then lay still. The wind came back then, soft, slow, like the breath after weeping. Luther sat on the porch steps. Blood on his sleeve, the locket in his hand. Len sat beside him. She said nothing. After a long while, she asked, Was Mama scared? Luther shook his head. She was fire. Unia curled against his side. Her hands trembled. I didn't want to kill anyone. You didn't, he said. You lived, that's what you did. Unia sniffed. Mama said the world would try to make us into stone? He nodded. She also said, Unia added, voice cracking, that someone would remember how to make us soft again. Luther closed his eyes and let the locket fall into his palm. Spring came slow, but it came. The snow melted into the earth like old sorrow. Luther rebuilt the barn. Not alone. The girls helped, hammering, hauling, laughing again. The chickens returned. So did the birdsong. One morning, Luther walked to the grave under the pine. He knelt there. Hands in the dirt, not to mourn, to plant, he dug with care, then laid the acorn bird Unia had given him into the soil. Covered it gently. Watered it, a small act. But it felt like firelight in the dark that evening. He carved a name into the stone marker at last. Mercy Kane, on the porch. He sat. Asterisk. The girls chased each other in the dusk, laughter rising like smoke. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. Asterisk. His hand rested on the Bible. Open now. For the first time in years. The wind passed through the trees like a hymn too old to name. His lips moved, a whisper, not a prayer, a promise. Asterisk.